Hello, winners, and welcome to Two for the Win with your hosts, Nick and Will, where we share international insight, perspectives, and levity on things such as mindset and leadership with Monday Mindset, Wanderlust Wednesday when we talk about the travel and the travel business, and Fanatic Friday when we talk about sports. You can plan on each episode being between 20 to 30 minutes in length, so you can plan accordingly. Please be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us so that you know when each episode drops. If you have feedback or some positive comments, please leave a review. Please email us, share us ideas. Happy to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And obviously, this episode is sponsored by Nick Menard and Associates with Dream Vacations. You want to have your next dream vacation? Give Nick a jingle jangle ring and he will get it scheduled for you. But in all seriousness, excited about today's episode. But before we tell our winners what we're going to talk about, happy Wanderlust Wednesday, Nick.
Happy Wednesday, Will. Happy Wednesday, winners.
Yeah, very excited. So today we are going to talk about Prague. And many of our listeners maybe haven't visited Prague. But I have to say, my recent trip, I know you've been there multiple times. I went there for the first time earlier this year. I loved it. And, our listeners may not know, but we both work for a large multinational company. One of the benefits that I get with that organization is we have offices around the world. And so I go visit those offices. And what I started to do several years ago is when I travel overseas to visit our teammates in other offices, I always extend by a few days. And I try to do a quick 2-day trip solo, check out a new place. And I've done things like Munich during Christmas time, Amsterdam, Lisbon, and most recently, I went to Prague. And I know when I told you I was considering Prague, you're like, oh yeah, you got to check out Prague. It did not disappoint. But before I share a little bit about my experience, maybe you'd like to share some of your thoughts with our winners about Prague.
Absolutely. So, as you already know, in the United States, when we think Europe, we think architecture, we think history. And that's definitely what resonates with me when it comes to Prague. When I was younger, the first time I went there, I was probably 18 or 19 years old. It was playing basketball, actually. So we played against the capital team in Prague, so Prague. And I was not excited at first. Why? As a young kid, young adult, Prague is synonym of boring when you're young because you want to go to Ibiza, you want to go to Barcelona, you want to go to places where you can party but later on, going again and again, I start loving actually this place because of their style, the architecture, like I mentioned. The history is huge there. You have different kind of time during the last few hundred years where things happen in Prague, and the ability to be able to go from place to place very easily. You will talk more about it because you just went recently, but I love the accessibility to really go anywhere you want and visit so many different places in a very small area was something that I really, really enjoyed. And you see things in Prague that you see nowhere else, even in Europe. So that's definitely a city that I would recommend Americans to go and check because probably not number one on your list. Everybody think Greece, Italy, England, Paris, yeah. But Prague is definitely a little gem to visit.
I agree. And so one of our offices is near London in a town called Egham. And flying from Heathrow Airport to Prague was 2 hours. I think it was 59 euro. It was super cheap. And I remember when we're starting our descent into the airport and you see nothing but farmland, but where they have all this farm and it's plush. It's green, like you would think of Ireland green or whatever, very plush. But you could see, from the airplane, the little villages. So they have a village, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 homes, circle around this plot of land. And then here's another one right over here. And you see a bunch of them. And it really gave me, just looking from above, coming in on the plane, an old medieval kind of feeling.
The hobbits.
Kind of, you know, but like little village, little communities, and I'm sure, you know, obviously everybody knows each other's name because they're so small. But that was really cool. And then, you know, I get into Prague, and the thing about Prague, there's a lot of things that struck me. I'll chat about, but for people who enjoy architecture, and I do, I really like various architecture. Prague was one of the few cities that I've been to where you could distinctly tell three different styles. And what I mean by that is you had the old Gothic style from like the medieval times and the Prague castle and the churches and stuff, and chat more about that. And then you can tell when communism was ruling Prague, because all that beautiful architecture is like gray slab buildings, and you can see the area where they developed it when it was under Soviet control. Not very artistic, very bland or whatever. And then you got the modern, you know, since they've you know, not been part of the Soviet Union when that disbanded, of course. And it was a very interesting mix of architectural styles and a city that is extremely walkable. I walked a ton. I'm trying to think. I don't think I took an Uber except from the airport to the hotel and then back from the hotel to the airport. I think every other time I walked. And if you're somebody who has trouble getting around, then yeah, you want to Uber. But if you really feel like getting in your steps, you can see a ton on foot and maybe not even have to get an Uber at all.
That's fantastic. That's what I mentioned. It's really what's specific to a lot of places in Europe, but definitely for Prague, it's extremely easy, walkable. So that's very fun. I have a question for you. I know you were a foodie. I think like people know that by now. So what is if you had the experience the food over there, what strikes you about the food style in Prague? If you can say something about that.
Yeah, and I'm sure people from the Czech Republic may take a tiny bit of offense to this, but I really equated the Prague cuisine very similar to Germanic cuisine. Like you had, you know, beef. Yeah. Very heavy on the meat, heavy on the potatoes. But I would say what made Prague, you know, a little bit different than say the Germanic food was the way they seasoned it. And they prepared it. It had different taste and things like that. But as you know, when I travel, I try to almost exclusively get food that's local to the area where I can. Like when we talked about our trip to Belgium, I think I had every Belgium dish that was what they were famous for. And the same with Prague. But it's definitely more meat and potato based like you would find in the Germanic countries.
Awesome. Also great for people here living in United States when they go to different countries. Some countries are more difficult for language. Prague, I mean, I remember when I went, that's absolutely no problem. English, I mean, I was not speaking English, but I know everybody were speaking English.
Yeah, a lot of people speak English.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's also very accessible for us here to go over there and actually not have any issue with the language at all. So that's also very, very popular. Anything in particular that you experienced since you went there recently, like any specific like museum maybe that you experienced, or if not experienced that you saw there, or any place in particular that you can tell our winners about to absolutely do? I know that I have someone in one of my teams who is going there next March with her boyfriend. So I mean, I know that not only her, but a lot of people may be willing to go soon, and so maybe some locations.
Yeah, so I'll start with some places I didn't go to, but I will the next time I go. Like they have a KGB museum. That would be kind of cool to see. They have other like national history museums, but I didn't do that because it was a shorter trip. But what I did do is, like I was saying, when I walked around, so Charles Bridge is a famous bridge. It's a massive bridge And along the bridge, they have various statues you can see people taking pictures of, because there's a lot of rivers and water. So if I remember correctly, there was like three main bridges, but the Charles's Bridge is the most well known in the area. There's a lot of shops and restaurants and things right around it. In fact, kind of an interesting experience. I was walking towards the Charles Bridge, and I don't know if they were Hare Krishnas or gypsies, but they had a parade, and there was like 50 of them, and they were playing music, and I think they're Hare Krishnas because they're bald and they had like the orangish roby deal, so monkish kind of. But they were jamming to some music and playing all that, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. So I sat and watched that for a bit, and then I walk across the bridge, and it's a bit of a trek on that one to get across it. But then once you cross, you have like what I refer to, one of the things I love about Windsor in the UK, where they have like the Harry Potter Diagon Alley in Windsor, kind of, or these little shops. Same thing. You walk across the Charles Bridge from the main downtown area. They got all these little shops. They have this brewery that was around, or pub, I should say. It's a bar that was around from the 1500s. It's one of Europe's oldest still functioning breweries, which is really cool. And then you walk past that, and I went to the Prague Castle, which is phenomenal. It's beautiful, super big. But let me just tell you, if you're somebody who gets winded easy or don't have the leg power, like they are steep steps. And I walked up those steps. And you remember how we talked about in Belgium at Waterloo going up? It wasn't quite that steep, of course, but it was steep enough where I had to stop a couple times. I got at the top, I'm dripping with sweat. People are looking at me. I'm like, well, but you can look across the whole city. Beautiful. And it reminded me like Park Güell in Barcelona, where you can look across the whole city. So when you go up to the Prague Castle, you can look across the whole city. And then they have this, major square, like most European cities. And then you have the castle on one side, the museum over here, and some other stuff. But it's just beautiful. And then you walk around and you kind of walk through this tunnel, and then you can walk past the castle and different stuff. And then you go into this park area. And the park is absolutely beautiful. It's green, plush with stuff. And all the while, you have the river right next to you. So you see people on a riverboat or different things. And it was phenomenal. But I think the things that stood out to me were the walkability going across the Charles Bridge, the food, and the beer. Prague is known for beer.
Absolutely.
I'm not a huge beer drinker. I'm more of a liquor drinker. But the beer in Prague is legit really good. And just that how many people spoke English and how nice, it was really easy to go around. Yeah, they were very nice, very accommodating. But it was a lovely time. And I mean, again, if you like architecture, so much to see. But I didn't really do a lot of museum hopping because I was 2 days, one night. I would go back and I would check those out.
Awesome. Well, thank you for perspective and explaining everything to our winners here, because if you remember correctly, when we talked about Belgium and France, we told you where to go to take the best picture. Of course, Bruges. We mentioned the Grand Place, the Groot Market in Brussels. We mentioned, of course, the beautiful scenery in Champagne in the northwest of France. And Barcelona, we mentioned where to go up north there, like at the Olympics swimming pool, where you can take the best picture of Barcelona, or like you mentioned, Park Güell. Also, when you're on top of it, you have like a panoramic picture that you can take of Barcelona. So we will try during those different city descriptions to tell you where to go to take the best picture. And for Prague, it's definitely on a castle. It's a hike, but then you have the best picture, and I think we all want that as a souvenir as well. We mentioned last week for river cruising, that's also a very popular destination. So you can literally river cruise through Prague from Bratislava, Budapest, all that, going to Amsterdam. So this is easy access also for river cruising. So that's also something very, very important to say. You mentioned, and I was going to ask you, like how people were towards you as an American. So we know in Europe, there are some cities who are more challenging sometimes, but definitely not Prague.
Yeah,
Prague,
no.
they are extremely open, extremely nice with tourists. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. People who like sports, Prague is well known in Europe to be extremely strong and very fanatic, like a Fanatic Friday, very fanatic fans for their soccer team, Slavia Prague, and the same team for basketball, Slavia Prague as well. So if you like sport and you want to do a tour in Europe and experience the atmosphere of sport overseas, Prague is one of those places where you can feel the passion of those fans without having the bad side of hooliganism like you can have in England or Greece, for example, Turkey, place like that. Or, if you go with your family, pay attention what you wear. If you wear like the opposite team, like kind of
Yeah, you don't want to
Prague.
do that.
Yeah, Prague is more open. I would still not recommend to wear the opposite team. Is not like NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB here in US. In Europe, they don't like really people going to a stadium with the opposite jersey. But Prague is one of those places that I would feel the safest if you want to do a sports trip in the city as well.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I do a lot of solo traveling in Europe because I extend off of business trips and never had any concerns about anything. Now, of course, I'm alert, right, and I'm making sure my head's on a swivel, but really no concerns. I forgot a major thing that was really cool was the astronomical clock. So it's in the old town square near a very Baroque area, and this clock is over 600 years old, and it's set up by like astronomy and how they do it. And I made sure that I was there at the time when it went off, and it's loud. Sometimes you hear some of the clocks. Like I think in Munich, it was loud, but it wasn't like loud where you're like, whew, this one got loud. And but it's right near this little shop, and like I said, the old town square and stuff. That's super cool to see and take pictures of because it's a unique design. And again, over 600 years old. Like here in the States, you have a house that's built in like 1940. You're like, oh my gosh, that's ancient. Here, they have a clock that's over 600 years old. So it adds a little perspective to what is old and what is new.
History. In Europe, of course, you will have a lot more history. And Czech Republic went through drastic history like the last 300 years, when you mentioned the communism, that was Czechoslovakia, who became Czech Republic with the war, like civil war and stuff like that. So that's definitely like a place to visit if you like history and architecture.
Yeah, and one of the things when I was reading up on Prague before I went to it is it was pretty much unscathed during World War II. Like it didn't get bombed too bad. So that's why a lot of their stuff that from the 1500s and that is in impeccable shape because they didn't have to rebuild it. It wasn't damaged and things like that. But I wish I could remember the place. I'm sure I found it on TripAdvisor because I go to TripAdvisor a lot and try to figure out places to go. But there was this restaurant where you walk in and then they go downstairs and it almost looks like, like you're going downstairs and almost like a basement type area. But they had obviously Czech cuisine, which I got, and the beer, which was great. But all across the entire walls and stuff were like murals and different paintings, and it kind of had that edgy hip vibe, but it didn't have like an edgy hip atmosphere. The atmosphere was chill, but the decor was like really vibrant and everything, and that was super cool. And I stayed in a hotel right smack dab in the middle of downtown. So again, if you want to go shopping, you want to hit different restaurants, you're tired towards the end of the day, you don't really want to walk around a lot. There's so much that's easily accessible and it's inexpensive. So Czech has their own Czech dollar. And, when they say, oh, it's 20,000 Czech for something, people may freak out, but it's like, I don't know, $30 or something like that. But they also accept the euro. And so what I did is I wasn't quite sure who would take what because it was my first time there. So I bank at Bank of America. So you can order it online. to get the currency exchange. And so I got Czech dollars and euros. I ended up using most of the Czech dollars just to use them, but I could have just easily just used euros and that would have been fine. In some places even took US dollars, but I always feel like I'm better off either paying in local currency or euro just to make sure the exchange rate works out well. But fantastic place. Went to a couple bars, met the bartenders. As soon as they hear me, they know I'm not from around the area. Very, extremely friendly. People sitting next to strangers, just striking up conversations, having great conversations. A lot of beauty in Prague in a variety of ways. I just highly recommend it. We'll definitely go back. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you for giving your perspective on Prague. I love to hear from someone who's been to the place recently. It's always better than to just talk about things we heard. So thank you for your perspective. And for me, it was a long time ago, but I can definitely remember some of the things you mentioned. And also for winners, very, very, very safe to go with your family, kids, things like that. I would have no problem going to Prague. And again, one of the best way to experience it, because people don't really travel from the US to Prague only. It's literally like river cruising or pre-made an itinerary in advance to a few different countries and cities. Every countries have different place to visit, of course. Czech Republic, Prague is 95% of where people are going. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying they don't have anything else around, they do. But touristically, I would say Prague is what you go for in Czech Republic. Mm-hmm. So Belgium, you have different place, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, you have tons of different place for all those countries. For Czech Republic, Prague is really the one city to it.
Yeah, that was my first time in the Eastern Europe kind of area. Was very impressed. I know Budapest is another place we talked about.
Yeah,
I'd look to go there at some point, another Eastern European place. But like I said, 2-hour flight from the UK, from London anyway. Airport, easy to get in and out. A lot of people speak English. It was a great time. It reminded me a lot of Munich, where you could spend a day or two and you would see 80-90% of what you need to see and have a great time. But I really enjoyed it. So if you're, like the river cruise, definitely would be a great place to stop, especially if you love to see the different architecture and style. Food is great. People are very kind. But even if you wanted to do a quick flight trip or from a train, it's really, that's the beauty of Europe. Everything's so close. It's not, like when we go to Vegas, it's a 5-hour flight. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if I flew from the UK for 5 hours, where I'd end up, but probably Russia. No, Moscow, I mean, but everything else is much closer. It's 3 hours or less. So highly recommend making Prague a stop in your itinerary for your next Europe trip.
Thank you, Will, again. That was great, and I hope you like it as well. We will try to, at least once a month, pick one city specifically to talk about. So if you think about anything or you would like to know about a specific destination, feel free to message us, email us, text us, whatever you want to use, social media, and we will try to accommodate as much as we can with some stories or some idea, or bring some guests who can explain those different destinations.
Yeah, and if you're looking to book your next dream vacation, no matter where it is in the world, but if it is to Prague or somewhere in Europe, please make sure to contact Nick Menard and Associates with Dream Vacation. This will wrap up another of our Wanderlust Wednesday. Hopefully you enjoy going on this journey visually, mentally with us. And if you've been there, please drop some comments. I'm sure there's places I missed that I should have said. Please drop those in the comments. But again, please subscribe, share, and follow us. Leave feedback, leave reviews. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us on this Wanderlust Wednesday, and looking forward to chatting with you all on our next Fanatic Friday. Be well, listeners.
Thank you, winners. Bye-bye.
Take care.